Yaotai Divine Palace, above the enchanted island. Yaotai Divine Palace, above the enchanted island. Her slender body wrapped around his, full of infinite allure. Her elegant and inviting figure was so close. The long dress decorated with phoenix patterns slowly slipped off, exposing the fair skin on her shoulders. Those eyes of hers seemed to be able to capture the souls. It caused Yi Futian quite some confusion. Yi Futian was burning up inside. He looked down at the figure that was entangled around him. There was a strong desire deep in his heart. There also seemed to be another figure in his mind that exhorted him to indulge himself, release his desire, and lose himself in it. Master Yi. Yao Shi looked up, eyes soft. She seemed to have the power to melt men's hearts. Both of Yi Futian's hands held that flawless face, then slipped down slowly to land on those delicate shoulders. Yao Shi's eyes closed slightly. She seemed to be just as lost in the moment as he was. One of Yi Futian's hands moved to Yao Shi's bosom. Yao Shi's lips slightly parted, a fragrance filled the air, and from those lips came a moan that was ever so soft and gentle. However, in the next moment, Yao Shi's eyes opened suddenly, staring at Yi Futian. Master Yi. The expression in Yao Shi's eyes kept changing. In them, he saw surprise, confusion, and discomfort. Upon Yi Futian's caressing fingers, there was an incredibly sharp sword will blooming. It penetrated through Yao Shi's body instantly and rushed into her body. In an instant, the sword will enveloped the body of Yao Shi, seemingly intent on destroying her. A tear rolled down from the corner of Yao Shi's eye. Pitifully, she asked, "Why is Master Yi treating me this way?" Yao Shi, you invited me to come, and I came. You invited me to cultivate in music, and I accompanied you, treating you as a friend. I do not wish for you to debase yourself, Yi Futian said slowly. However, Yao Shi, you set me up. Is it as retribution against Emperor Xia and the princess? As his voice faded, the sword will on his fingers became stronger, tearing everything. Yao Shi's beautiful figure gradually became transparent, on the verge of being torn apart and shattered. Traces of sword will pierced through, and Yao Shi's figure immediately crumbled and dissipated between heaven and earth as if it had never existed in the first place. Looking at that disappearing figure, Yi Futian appeared cool and collected, as if nothing had happened. He turned his gaze and looked in front of him, surveying this beautiful enchanted island. He spoke into the void, saying, "The heavenly demon song of the 6 desires wasn't incomplete. The goddess didn't want me to see the rest of it. It was 6 desires controlling a person's emotions and desires, taking over the feelings and thoughts of the other." If I guessed correctly, the bottom portion of the heavenly demon song of the 6 desires should be able to create an illusion that is close to reality, and once the emotions are incited by it, they will be controlled bit by bit until they are mired in the abyss and unable to escape. When crossing the fairy pool, as I stepped onto the enchanted island, it appeared that the illusion had been lifted, but it was not so. I'm still inside the illusion, right? Yi Futian's voice called into the void. As Yi Futian's voice faded, a burst of laughter as clear as silver bells was heard. Indeed, Yao Shi didn't judge incorrectly. To be able to maintain such strong control within the heavenly demon song of the 6 desires. No wonder you are the person valued by Emperor Xia and Xia Qingyun. The voice fell, and a figure drifted down from above the enchanted island. It was Yao Shi, clad in a dress, dignified and elegant, and exquisite beyond words. Her smiles and movements were full of charm. She drifted down until stood in front of Yi Futian, smiling. She asked, "How did Master Yi detect it? Was Yao Shi that unattractive?" She seemed to be a bit disappointed when she spoke, but her demeanor was irresistible. When I arrived on the enchanted island, everything appeared normal. In fact, reality and illusion had already been merged into one. Goddess Yao Shi taught me to play the guqin, attracting me little by little. It even caused a hallucination at one point, and I confused the goddess with others. Furthermore, the desire was getting stronger and stronger, but in the current realm of the goddess, even defeating the heavenly demon song of the 6 desires would not affect my emotions. In my realm, it should also be impossible for me to experience the multiple hallucinations that I did. Therefore, the only possibility was that the heavenly demon song of the sixth desire had never really stopped playing, it was just that I could no longer hear the melody because I was always inside the illusion. In his realm, for a moment he had really been tempted to indulge and give in to his desire. That, in itself, was a weakness. When he'd looked at Yao Shi, she'd appeared sometimes as Jiyu and sometimes as Glass Saint, which made him keenly realize that he had always been within the illusion created by the heavenly demon song of the six desires, which magnified desires in general. Was Master Yi tempted? Yao Shi asked with a smile. Yao Shi, since you are an expert in the heavenly demon song of the six desires, you should understand that there are desires in everyone's heart, and I am no exception, Yi Futian replied. Can you lift the illusion now? If it is not an illusion but reality, and Yao Shi is willing to promise herself to Master Yi, would Master Yi accept? Yao Shi asked again. Does it matter? Yi Futian looked at Yao Shi and said, You got close to me and even invited me to the Yaotai Divine Feast, and none of that had anything to do with feelings. You held such a strong grudge against His Majesty and the princess, how could you change your feelings so easily? I am but the prey chosen by the goddess. Yao Shi walked until she was by Yi Futian's side. She looked in Yi Futian's eyes and said softly, Does Master Yi not believe me? Stop playing, Yi Futian said. Playing? Yao Shi suddenly laughed. She looked at Yi Futian and said, If it was Xia Qingyun asking, would Master Yi refuse? You are too obstinate. Perhaps she didn't even know you and never wanted to compare herself to you, Yi Futian said to Yao Shi. Her obsession with comparing herself to Xia Qingyun had become the focus of her life. She is a noble princess, her father is the emperor, and her mother is the queen. There is no need for her to compare herself with me. Yao Shi laughed at herself and said, Stop it. As her voice fell, something seemed to have disappeared. The enchanted island was still the enchanted island, but it seemed less perfect as it had been before and now closer to reality. The feeling was remarkable. Reality and illusion seemed to have truly fused into one. From the void, many goddesses floated down one after the other, landing in different positions on the enchanted island. Yao Shi was still looking at Yi Futian. She said, When I hosted the Yaotai Divine Feast, the world declared that it was so I could choose a path companion. Now, I would like to choose Master Yi as my path companion. Would Master Yi be agreeable to it? Now, without the effects of the illusion, Yi Futian felt that everything had gone back to normal. His emotions were no longer controlled by such a strong desire but seemed to be extraordinarily peaceable. Yi Futian saw Yao Shi gazing at him, waiting for his answer. As I said before, I have a wife, Yi Futian replied. I see. Yao Shi smiled. Her smile seemed beautiful but sad. From her point of view, it was just an excuse. Everyone in the world knew that Yi Futian's wife had fallen in the 9 states' sacred war. It had been years since then. Still, he used such an excuse to refuse her. Even though she was so proactive, between her and Xia Qingyun, Yi Futian was more willing to choose Xia Qingyun. Sure enough, she still lost. At that moment, a group of people arrived in a flash. Yao Shi turned her attention toward them and asked, What is it? Emperor Xia's people are here, the person replied. Yao Shi's eyes flashed strangely and she smiled sarcastically. First, it was Xiaolun. Now someone else? Was he worried that she would steal away the man favored by his beloved little princess, or was he concerned about her fall from grace? Go and look, Yao Shi said, but before she could move, she felt a strong force coming her way, shrouding the enchanted island within it. Yao Shi saw the figure at the forefront and let out a bright smile. Xia Qingyun, finally. Was this because she could no longer sit by the side any longer? The foremost figure was Xia Qingyun. She had launched a grand matrix of space to come across the void, descended directly into Western region, and rushed to Yaotai Divine Palace. Order of Emperor Xia. This time, the person next to Xia Qingyun stepped forward and looked at Yao Shi, declaring, to grant Yao Shi the title of Princess Shi, surname Xia, and a residence of Princess Shi which is to be built within Emperor Xia's palace so that Princess Shi can visit at any time. Yao Shi was stunned. Her father wanted to name her as a princess? She looked at Xia Qingyun again. Xia Qingyun said, My father the emperor wanted me to give you this message. The time, the Holy Mother of the West chose to stay and did not want to enter the palace, and my father did not force her. You do not need to bother with grievances. As long as you are willing, you can cultivate at any time in the princess residence at the palace. You came to show pity on me? Yao Shi looked at Xia Qingyuan. For so many years, she had always compared herself with Xia Qingyuan. No, Xia Qingyuan said. I came to pick someone up. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Futian and said, He is mine. Yi Futian looked at Xia Qingyuan and was speechless. Yao Shi looked at Xia Qingyuan and suddenly smiled. He was her person. She turned her attention to Yi Futian and said softly, What happened today, Yao Shi will always remember. I pray that Master Yi will not forget Yao Shi. Yi Futian looked awkward and saw Xia Qingyuan's eyes staring at him coldly. He couldn't help but feel fretful. Women were scary, especially beautiful ones. The goddess taught me a song today. Yi Futian will remember it well, Yi Futian said. Yao Shi handed a musical score to Yi Futian, saying, This is the bottom half of the heavenly demon song of 6 desires. Take it if it pleases Master Yi to accept it. Should the feelings of today persist, you know where to find me. Yi Futian looked at Yao Shi. He did not refuse and accepted the score. Yao Shi had set him up. This score, perhaps, served as compensation to him. Moreover, now that Emperor Xia had also given Yao Shi the title of princess, the two of them would probably meet again in the future, so there was no need to be adversarial because of this. However, Yao Shi's words contained some hints which made it easy for others to make conjectures. But he could not explain anything in public. Many people from Emperor Xia's palace looked at him with a strange look. Now, both princesses were here. This guy was really something else. I will take my leave now, Yi Futian said, turning to go. Xia Qingyuan followed close behind. She did not spare Yao Shi another look. Many, such as Xia Luan and the village chief, had come from the air, waiting for the news. They had not expected Xia Qingyuan to come in with an entourage. Master, are you having fun? The black-winged condor blinked his eyes and glanced at Xia Qingyuan. This she-devil was pretty arrogant. Tie this beast up and take it back to the palace to cook, Xia Qingyuan said, glancing at the black-winged condor. Ah! Pity the poor black-winged condor, who let out a scream with a shudder. After the departure of the people from Emperor Xia's palace, Yaotai Enchanted Island returned to its former calm atmosphere. After the departure of the people from Emperor Xia's palace, Yaotai Enchanted Island returned to its former calm atmosphere. On the Enchanted Island where Yi Futian had resided previously, a group of people had arrived. The person in front of the group was graceful and elegant, with stunning looks. The feminine charm she exuded was even greater than that of Yao Shi. Her glory was impossible to behold. Moreover, judging her age from her appearance alone, she was just slightly older than Yao Shi. Her actual age was impossible to fathom. This person was the mistress of Yaotai Divine Palace, the Holy Mother of the West. Yao Shi looked up at the Holy Mother and called out with a smile, Mother! I remember that I told you once that the heavenly demon song of the 6 desires can truly stoke human desire. Even if you could control a man's emotions for a moment, and even if you succeeded, you could not possibly keep his heart. After all, they think of it as mere desire. The Holy Mother of the West said to Yao Shi, In the future, don't do it again. Was this the reason why Mother lost to Queen Shao? Yao Shi smiled and said, Mother cultivated in peace and was detached from matters of the heart with no more arguments, but did he pay more attention to you? Xia Qingyuan was right. He asked me to go to the palace, and I refused because I wanted to cut off the past. It was my choice. There were no regrets. As Ren Huang, he had his pride, continued the Holy Mother of the West. But he still can't help but send people here today, Yao Shi continued. Mother lost to Queen Shao once upon a time, but I won't give up so easily. Yao Shi, Holy Mother of the West, sighed and looked at her daughter, saying, I'm afraid you will get pulled in deeper and deeper. Yi Futian could maintain such clarity under the magic of the heavenly demon song of the 6 desires and his desire under control. He possessed such a reputation. Surely he was no simple character. Clearly, Emperor Xia had intentionally focused on training Yi Futian and did not oppose Yi Futian's close relationship with Xia Qingyu. In the future, it may be another him again. Naturally, she did not want Yao Shi to repeat her mistake. Go see him at the palace when you get a chance. Since he gave you the title of princess, it was a declaration to the world that he acknowledged you, so don't keep on resenting him, the Holy Mother continued. Yao Shi smiled and said, fine. Although this year's Yaotai Divine Feast was more like a comedy of error, the news still spread out rapidly, creating sensations in Emperor Xia's realm. Emperor Xia had granted Yao Shi the title of Princess Shi, giving her the surname Xia. Yao Shi's real name was Xia Shi. After all, she was the daughter of Emperor Xia. Once, the Holy Mother of the West and Queen Shao had competed for the title of the first beauty in Emperor Xia's realm, but they did not expect that there was such a story behind it. Emperor Xia had lived up to his reputation as the emperor, having conquered the two most beautiful women in Emperor Xia's realm. The Holy Mother of the West of Yaotai Divine Palace also belonged to Emperor Xia. Many people admired and envied the emperor. His Majesty was nothing if he did not desire the most beautiful women in the world, despite his cultivation. However, all most people could do was only use their imagination. But, today, someone else had exhibited similar tendencies. Yi Futian. On the enchanted island of Yaotai Divine Palace, did something happen between Yao Shi and Yi Futian? Xia Qingyuan, the little princess, actually came in person to pick up the one herself. What else could there be but envy? Xia Qingyuan, Yi Futian, and the rest were traveling in the direction of the Emperor Xia's palace. On the way back, Xia Qingyuan remained silent and did not speak, but Xia Luan and Yi Futian were chatting rather delightfully. The black-winged condor had been hiding behind Yi Futian, trembling, his mouth closed tight. He dared not speak any more nonsense. He couldn't afford to mess with her. He was still thinking, this she-devil wouldn't really play for real, would she? She was way too scary. Follow me to the palace. When they had arrived at the center of Emperor Xia's realm, Xia Qingyuan turned her head and spoke to Yi Futian. Very well. Yi Futian nodded and asked the people of the cottage to return to the villa first. As soon as the black-winged condor heard Yi Futian, he started sneaking toward the back, getting ready to slip away. Did I say that you could go? Xia Qingyuan stopped and stared at the black-winged condor. The wings of the black-winged condor stiffened. If this she-devil was displeased with the master, why take it out on him? He was only asking if the master was happy or not, and she had a problem with that? He turned, trembling, and said to Xia Qingyuan, whatever the princess commands, little condor is at your service, through hell or high water. Yi Futian looked at the black-winged condor with contempt. This was as much resolve as this useless thing could muster. Then come to the palace with me, Xia Qingyuan said. The body of the black-winged condor stiffened even more. He looked to Yi Futian pitifully and said in his head, Master, help me. This she-devil was playing for real. He could never go to the palace, not even if they killed him. The princess asked you to go, so go. She won't really roast you, Yi Futian said with some despise. The black-winged condor blinked and stole a glance at Xia Qingyuan again. Why wouldn't I? Xia Qingyuan said. The black-winged condor's hair stood up on his back, sensing murderous intent. Yi Futian was at his wit's end. He looked at Xia Qingyuan and said, what angered the princess? What did the little condor do? What angered her? Xia Luan glanced at Yi Futian and silently turned in another direction. Best not to get involved in this matter. The others who were following them also stayed far away. They saw nothing and knew nothing. His eyes were disrespectful. Can I punish him? Xia Qingyuan asked, looking at Yi Futian. Then punish him, but there is no need for the princess to terrorize him. Yi Futian continued, and since when did I become the princess's person? My father, the emperor, commanded you as my imperial bodyguard. Is there a problem? Xia Qingyuan said coldly, I sent a messenger to tell you to go to the golden hall of the lotus at the palace to cultivate. Why didn't you go? If I hadn't gone to Yaotai Divine Palace, were you planning on staying? Yi Futian looked at Xia Qingyuan and said, I don't like restraint. If the princess thinks I don't obey orders, I will resign as the imperial bodyguard. Do you think your resignation is up to you? Xia Qingyuan's voice was a little colder. She looked furious. She stared at Yi Futian and said, I refuse your resignation. In the distance, Xia Luan and the others stayed out of the way, but couldn't resist listening in. This was war. For as long as he had known her, Xia Luan had never seen his sister throw a tantrum. Was this because she was antagonized? When they left, Yao Shi's words had a lot of hidden meaning. On their way back, Yi Futian didn't even offer any explanation. Others who had followed Xia Qingyuan also felt it too. Though the princess was mostly quiet, she was rarely angry. Never mind on account of a mere imperial bodyguard who dared to talk back to the princess. But only an idiot or moron dared to treat Yi Futian as a mere bodyguard. Yi Futian looked at Xia Qingyuan and said lightly, Thank you, princess, for coming to my rescue this time, but I could not possibly serve the princess forever. Perhaps, in a little while, I will inform Emperor Xia of my intention to travel and do the things I need to do. Xia Qingyuan was stunned for a moment. She looked at Yi Futian, then asked, What things do you have to do? Look for someone. Yi Futian looked into the distance and said. When Xia Qingyuan heard what he had to say, suddenly, she was silent. She, too, looked into the distance and said quietly, Very well. As she was speaking, she continued forward, and everyone was a little bewildered. What was happening? Why did the whole thing suddenly come to an end? Master, can I go now? The black-winged condor asked in voice transmission. Yi Futian glanced at him, then stepped forward, leaving the poor black-winged condor to decide whether to follow him or not. Finally, he gritted his teeth and caught up to them. Xia Luan and the others followed in doubt, bewilderment written all over their faces. In the palace, the group retired to their respective quarters. Xia Qingyuan took Yi Futian somewhere. This was the palace above the 9th layer of heaven of Emperor Xia's palace, ethereal and ever sacred. When Yi Futian saw that Xia Qingyuan had brought him here, he knew who wanted to see him. In front of him, on the steps that disappeared into the mist, a figure stood quietly. It was as if he had been waiting for him. Go, Xia Qingyuan said and left. Yi Futian walked forward and saw the figure turn around to look at him. Your Majesty! Yi Futian bowed to pay his respect. This was the first time he had met Emperor Xia in the truest sense. At the earliest, he had seen the projection of Emperor Xia in the lower world. Now that he had seen the true body of Renhuang, although there was no discernible breath, it gave out a feeling of giant, akin to a god, similar to the impression that Emperor Li had given him. Likewise, Emperor Xia was also sizing up Yi Futian. Although he had noticed Yi Futian for a long time, this was also the first time he had seen him up close. This guy was audacious. When he was in the 9 states of the lower world, he had turned that world upside down, causing Emperor Xia to have to deal with the aftermath on his behalf. Now in the upper world, he was equally as bothersome. Did you touch Yao Shi? Emperor Xia stared at Yi Futian. Yi Futian shivered, but fortunately he had not. No, Yi Futian replied resolutely. His voice had just drifted off when the feeling of the pressure on his body weakened. Emperor Xia stepped up and came to Yi Futian, patted him on the shoulder, saying, It's impossible for young men to behave themselves. When I was your age, I had many romantic adventures as well, but don't be excessive, kid. Ah. Yi Futian looked up at Emperor Xia and blinked, revealing an innocent look. Excessive? He had no idea what that was supposed to mean. Seeing Yi Futian's innocent look, Emperor Xia wanted to give this guy a beating but thought better of it and stopped himself. Instead, he patted his shoulder again. Between Qingyuan and Yao Shi, whichever one you like, as long as they are willing, I have no opinion on the matter. But if you go too far, I won't spare you. Yi Futian looked awkward and finally understood what Emperor Xia meant. Since Yao Shi was also the daughter of Emperor Xia, then the emperor had 2 daughters. The excess that he was referring to was naturally. This old man was a genius. Yi Futian clearly understood what Emperor Xia meant. Yi Futian clearly understood what Emperor Xia meant. That old guy actually had thoughts like that. Well, not that it didn't sound exciting or anything though. But then again, just thoughts, nothing more. He wasn't that type of person after all. Yi Futian's actions were more benign than what was going on in his head. He bowed right away after hearing Emperor Xia's words and said, "Your Majesty, I dare not harbor such thoughts." "Dare not?" Emperor Xia smirked coldly at him and asked, "Is there anything you dare not do? That kid is the princess's valet in name, but since when did he ever give any face to Qingyuan, eh?" Emperor Xia thought. One hell of an asterisk soul, that's what he is, the emperor thought. Emperor Xia dared not subject his precious daughter to any degree of grievances, however slight it might have been. Yet, for a long time, what his daughter had been occupied with was little more than what was going on with Yi Futian. The kid is full of sh*t. Yi Futian had no idea where the resentment that Emperor Xia harbored came from. Xia Qingyuan and Yao Shi? But then again, he thought it was best for him to shut up at that moment. He then lowered his head obediently and said nothing. The very reason he dared do whatever he did in Emperor Xia's realm, be it going up to Lihan Heaven all those years ago, or the more recent act of throwing his weight around at the Shao clan's manor, was standing right before him, after all. To put it more bluntly, it was because he served Emperor Xia. There were a lot of people in Emperor Xia's realm who saw what it was like between him and Xia Qingyuan, but he knew better than anyone that Emperor Xia, who was the one who kept him around after the Sacred War of the Nine States. He was the one who truly backed Yi Futian up. The old guy who stood before him at that moment was the greatest boss in Emperor Xia's realm, one that he could not afford to offend. He could have offended anyone but Emperor Xia. Emperor Xia glared at him after seeing Yi Futian playing possum and asked, "You've been to Dali. How was it?" The Dali dynasty rules over both the upper and lower worlds and was very cohesive, but there were also shortcomings. The royal members and extended families were very powerful and rather xenophobic, so much so that they did not like the imperial advisor all that much. Dali dynasty would be stronger otherwise, Yi Futian answered. All of that is but Emperor Li's maneuvers for balancing power. Emperor quipped casually, but then again, the imperial advisor of Dali is truly someone indeed. If he has taken a liking to you so much, when will you ask him to come over and serve Emperor Xia's realm? The realm here has no royalty or extended families to be concerned about. He would absolutely have a better time here than in Emperor Li's realm. Yi Futian was speechless. It was the first time he came to see Emperor Xia. Everything he knew about the old man crumbled. Emperor Xia appeared carefree and laid back, nothing like the imposing, almighty impression that Yi Futian had of him. That was probably something born out of the projections of Emperor Xia from when Yi Futian was still in the lower worlds. Is the emperor actually telling me to get the imperial advisor to betray his own country? Yi Futian wondered. Your Majesty, Emperor Li is good to the imperial advisor of Dali and holds him in very high regard. It is utterly impossible to have the imperial advisor betray Emperor Li's realm under such circumstances, Yi Futian replied. It had a lot to do with a person's character. If a person were being very trusted and valued by one's sovereign, and said person betray their sovereign without reason, or worse, for their own interests, then there would be little character of such a person in the first place. The imperial advisor was willing to escort him back to Emperor Xia's realm due to having taken a liking to him. Still, the imperial advisor would never betray Emperor Li. That was, unless Emperor Li was a trash person. Yet, if Emperor Li had been one such person, the imperial advisor would not have taken his position of imperial advisor in the first place. There is nothing absolute in this world. Time is capable of changing many things. Perhaps, you might become the lord of a realm someday, or even rule over the realms. There might no longer be Emperor Xia's realm or Emperor Li's realm. Emperor Xia turned around and walked up the steps, his back facing Yi Futian. As a person who trains and seeks the great path, one shall always be unfettered and free. However, there is still a need to be wary of boundaries. He then turned and shot a warning look at Yi Futian, who, having just lifted his head before, lowered it right away, feeling rather speechless. What about trust between people, then? Your Majesty, I have something that I would like to seek your guidance with, Yi Futian, who was hanging his head low, said at that moment. Speak. Emperor Xia looked at him and said, I have heard from the princess that my wife might not have perished. There was an empress in the 3,000 realms whose methods are capable of communicating with the heavens, and her will is capable of transcending the 3,000 realms. Could that be possible? Yi Futian asked. Having broken into Saint Plain, he was not able to venture further away. Yes. Emperor Xia nodded. It might be possible, but the chance is slim, and it's best not to keep your hopes up too high. Yi Futian clenched his fists slightly and felt somewhat tense. So long as there was still hope, he wanted to see for himself. Your Majesty, who might that empress be, and where would I be able to find her? Yi Futian asked. You want to go out and look for her despite having just become a saint? Emperor Xia glanced at Yi Futian plainly and continued, You're quite in a hurry. That empress is at the top among all within the 3,000 realms. She reigns supreme. Even if I were to go out and look for her, she might not have even bothered taking a good look at me. Your current level of training might not even be worth mentioning. I would only want to look for my wife, and I have no intention of becoming the empress's enemy. Yi Futian then pressed on, Please tell me, Your Majesty. I will inform Qingyan, and when you're ready to go, you may ask her, Emperor Xia replied, and Yi Futian nodded. Thank you, Your Majesty. Is there anything else you need of me, Your Majesty? Yi Futian asked again. Yeah, get lost. Emperor Xia waved his hand dismissively at Yi Futian and said, I didn't even bother settling the score with him, and he is already in a hurry to get out? The emperor thought. The kid is indeed full of sh*t. Yi Futian felt rather speechless at Emperor Xia's attitude and said, I shall take my leave then. He then turned around and left, still feeling rather speechless. Emperor Xia was indeed totally different from how Yi Futian had expected him to be. But of course, Emperor Xia indeed felt more approachable that way, due to the lack of distance stemming from the lack of that high and mighty attitude. High and mighty, that was how he felt Emperor Li was like. Even when he was telling Yi Futian that he intended to marry his daughter to the young man, the emperor still seemed so distant, looking down at the living beings from the clouds above. Yi Futian returned to the cottage villa right after he left the palace instead of getting snorted at in the princess residence. Xia Qingyan found him to be incredibly irksome at the moment, and it was best that he did not go anywhere near her. The news of Yao Shi being made a princess spread throughout Emperor Xia's realm several days later. On that day, a group of people arrived at Emperor Xia's palace, serving as escorts to Yao Shi. It was a happening that caught the attention of everyone in Emperor Xia's palace. There would be 2 princesses of Emperor Xia after the emperor made Yao Shi a princess. Everyone wondered how Emperor Xia would treat a princess who had been out there for so many years. However, during the Yaotai divine feast that day, Emperor Xia had sent Xia Lun before sending someone with Xia Qingyu. That meant that the emperor was still concerned about Yao Shi, nonetheless, or he would not have been paying so much attention to her. Yao Shi came straight to the Emperor Xia's palace high in the clouds and was able to see the biological father that she had always wanted to see for all those years, the man who stood at the very pinnacle of Emperor Xia's realm. Both of them looked at each other and said nothing. The scene in the fleeting clouds was unusually quiet. Emperor Xia finally sighed after some time, breaking the silence. He said, Do you hate me? I dare not hate you, father, Yao Shi said. Emperor Xia was able to hear the distance between the two of them from the tone that she had taken. It was something that had never been there when he was talking to Xia Qingyuan. But he was able to understand. As speculated by all, if Emperor Xia did not care about Yao Shi, he would not have concerned himself with the Yaotai divine feast. She was still his daughter, after all. I had sent Xia Lun to stop you in hopes of preventing you from punishing yourself for what happened all those years ago. What happened between your mother and me was our own choice, and we respected each other's choices. You could hate me, but there is no reason for you to hurt yourself. Emperor Xia walked up and looked at Yao Shi, saying, You thought I've never been concerned with you, but in truth, I've been to Yaotai Divine Palace quite a number of times to see you. You didn't know it, nor did your mother. Yao Shi looked up at Emperor Xia. If the emperor was willing, it was naturally possible for him to go and see her without anyone else knowing. I'm not telling you all this because I want your forgiveness. I don't want to see my daughter live with hate and resentment. As a descendant of Ren Huang, you should be living freely instead, Emperor Xia looked at her eyes and said. Yao Shi lowered her head a little, and her eyes were somewhat reddened. She was unable to understand how the man she had hated for decades was standing right in front of her eyes, yet she was unable to bring herself to hate him. She was his daughter, a daughter of a Renhuang, a princess of extremely high prestige in all of Emperor Xia's realm. I have tried letting it go, but perhaps I still need time, Yao Shi sighed and said. I will give you time. Emperor Xia nodded and continued, Do you have any other wishes? If I do, would you grant them? Yao Shi asked. So long as it is something within my capacity to grant, Emperor Xia said. Of course, Yao Shi said with a smile. Speak. I want a valet. Yao Shi looked at Emperor Xia and said. Emperor Xia was dumbfounded. His brows twitched slightly as he looked at Yao Shi and asked, Yi Futian? Would you be able to grant that? Yao Shi looked at him and asked. Emperor Xia was unable to come up with an answer. It was apparent that Yao Shi had not been able to let it all slide. Yi Futian was the valet of his other daughter. Yi Futian might be a valet, but he is not required to fulfill any of a valet's duties. He is a valet in name only. While he might be Qing Yuan's valet, he never stayed in Qing Yuan's place or acted as a valet. If you want him to be your valet, you'll only need his approval. Emperor Xia knew that Yao Shi was very sensitive at the moment. If he were to tell her that Yi Futian belonged to Xia Qing Yuan, it would have incited her instead. Every word he said right there was the truth. He had not lied to Yao Shi. Thank you, father. I shall try. Yao Shi smiled and nodded. Both of them chatted for a while after that. That day, Yao Shi moved into her new place. To the people of Emperor Xia's palace, it was not a small matter. Furthermore, the first thing she did after moving in was send people to the cottage villa to summon Yi Futian. Xia Qingyuan sent someone over to the cottage villa and summoned Yi Futian as soon as she found what was going on. As such, Yi Futian, who was playing his guqin on the plains at the mountains, received summons from both Xia Qingyuan and Yao Shi. He took a look at Qin Zhuang, who was there to deliver the news, and said, Tell the envoys that I'm now training in isolation. I'm not going anywhere. Understood. Qin Zhuang left to relay the message. Both groups of people left and sighed deep down after hearing his reply. Yi Futian was probably the only person in all of Emperor Xia's realm who dared to behave in such an abrasive, cocky manner. 2 princesses asked to see him, and he was seeing none of them. Trouble was brewing in Emperor Xia's palace. Yi Futian continued to play his tune or train. He was not the only one doing so, as everyone in the cottage villa was training diligently as well. Among the ones from the cottage villa at the moment, only Yi Futian and the Sword Saint had made it to Saint Plain. Yu Sheng, Gu Donglu, Yi Wuchen, and the others were naturally doing their best in hopes of attaining sainthood. It was year 10024 of the Divine Prefecture calendar, and a lot had happened in Emperor Xia's realm in the past year. It was year 10024 of the Divine Prefecture calendar, and a lot had happened in Emperor Xia's realm in the past year. Yi Futian became a saint, and Shao Sheng had perished. The Shao clan, which had been extremely renowned for a time, seemed to show signs of decline. There was yet another princess in Emperor Xia's palace, Princess Shi. It was said that she kicked up a lot of fuss after moving into the royal palace, being at odds with Xia Qingyuan. Princess Xia Qingyuan seemed to have gotten herself a rival. There were signs of activity from Dali dynasty's army at the borders of Emperor Xia's realm, and there had been several skirmishes. That alerted Emperor Xia's realm considerably, and armies had been sent there to strengthen border defense, as well as keep a close eye on the movements of the neighboring dynasty. However, it seemed as if none of that had anything to do with Yi Futian. Ever since he had returned to the cottage villa after the Yaotai Divine Feast, he had been focused on his training. Training at Saint Plain required more time than before to see noticeable progress. While it was said that being able to step into Saint Plain itself had been an achievement of a different magnitude, it still seemed inadequate to Yi Futian. It was especially so since he had developed thoughts of venturing far outside of Emperor Xia's realm, and that would have required him to enhance his powers continuously. If he were to get to the stage like that of the Swordmaster of Lihan, he would have been able to come and go anywhere as he pleased, so long as he did not get on the bad side of Renhuang class of beings. Emperor Xia's realm seemed extraordinarily lively in the new year. The Divine Cloud Valley, which was known as the number-armoring clan in all of Emperor Xia's realm, was no exception. Great old halls in the Divine Cloud Valley were glittering with golden brilliance. The place was filled with mighty ones, and the Valley Master had been one of the followers of Emperor Xia, an armorer serving the Emperor, specifically. The Divine Cloud Valley would have been able to remain a prestigious clan whose status was immutable in Emperor Xia's realm, so long as their people did not commit grave offenses like treason. There were several silhouettes seen high in the sky above Divine Cloud Valley on that day. The group of people landed right before they entered the valley as a sign of respect. The guards outside of the valley were unable to help but gauge one of those who came, one who was dressed in white and had silver hair, looking to be of exceptional bearing. There was only one person in all of Emperor Xia's realm who sported such an appearance, which made him stand out like the sun at high noon. "I'm Yi Futian, and I've come to pay the Valley Master a visit. Please inform your superiors." Yi Futian cupped his hands and said as he went through all of the required proprieties. The guards were shocked to find that the man was Yi Futian. "Please hold on for a moment, Saint Yi." A guard went in to deliver the word. Someone else came out to receive Yi Futian's party into the valley not long after. "Please forgive us, Saint Yi. There are honored guests at the valley today, and that was why there was a delay," the one who received them explained to Yi Futian. "No matter. I'm only here to pay a visit, after all." "Please, lead the way," Yi Futian replied, but he was still curious. From what he heard from the other man, there was already someone here before they did, and it seemed that those people were of exceptional status, and he wondered who they might have been. Yi Futian and his party came to a grand, old hall, and there was already quite a crowd at the place. Yi Futian saw several familiar faces in the crowd before him. Gongsun Zhong, Gongsun Ni, Gongsun Xian, and some others were all there. Gongsun Zhong looked rather complicated when he saw Yi Futian show up. He had been somewhat dismissive of him at Old Man Zhao's birthday banquet all those years ago. It was a testament to his arrogance, which stemmed from his exceptional talents. However, he remembered what happened in the Battle of Empty Realm well. At present, Yi Futian was someone known everywhere. He had let go of his obsession with Xia Qingyuan back at the Battle of Empty Realm, and he had little to resent Yi Futian for, but what happened left a lasting impression on him nonetheless. "Brother Gongsun." Yi Futian cupped his hands and smiled as he greeted Gongsun Zhong, apparently without care for the scuffles they had back then. He was able to tell that Gongsun Zhong had held back many things himself. Gongsun was dumbfounded for a moment when he saw Yi Futian greeting him, before sighing deep down. It seemed that the difference between him and Yi Futian had gotten increasingly large. Gongsun Zhong then lifted his hands and returned Yi Futian's greeting. "Ms. Ni, Miss Xian, it's been a while." Yi Futian turned to look at the Gongsun sisters. Luo Fan came as well, and Yi Futian had deliberately brought his older brother along. Since both his fifth brother and Gongsun Xian had taken a liking to each other, he did not mind playing matchmaker and presenting them with more opportunities to meet up. As for the result, he was not trying to force anything but let things take their course. "It's been a while indeed." Both sisters nodded. They were acquaintances back at the Battle of Empty Realm. Gongsun Xian turned her eyes to Luo Fan, who scratched his head for a bit and said, "Well, Divine Cloud Valley is a really big place. Shall I give you a tour?" Gongsun Xian looked at him and said. Luo Fan's eyes sparkled, yet Yi Futian butted in immediately, "My fifth brother knows a thing or two about armoring. If you'd be willing to give him a tour at Divine Cloud Valley, I'm sure he'd be delighted." "That's so." A brimming voice spoke. "If that's the case, have your fifth brother come over more often then. It would do him a lot of good learning armoring arts right here." Yi Futian turned his head around and found the person who spoke was an elder wearing a golden robe, who smiled as he looked at Yi Futian's party. There was another youth who looked extraordinary at the elder's side, looking at Yi Futian with a smile. "Yi Futian, here to pay you a visit, Valley Master," Yi Futian bowed and said. He then looked at the youth at the Valley Master's side and said, "Greetings, Your Highness." While it was the first time he laid eyes on the young man, his bearing and appearance bore some similarities with that of Emperor Xia and Xialun. Furthermore, he was an honored guest whom the Valley Master attended to personally, which spoke volumes of his status. That young man was none other than the fourth prince, Xia Kuan. Xia Kuan took a look at Yi Futian and smiled, saying, "It's no wonder that my sisters are getting at each other's throats in the royal palace. You really are the number one in my generation in Emperor Xia's realm." "You're too kind, Your Highness," Yi Futian smiled and said. "His Highness is correct, though. There is indeed none among your generation throughout all of Emperor Xia's realm who would be able to overpower you." The Valley Master then added with a smile, "Anyway, what brings you here to Divine Cloud Valley today?" "To tell the truth, I'm here to ask for your help in matters concerning armoring today, Senior." Yi Futian then continued straightforwardly, "However, I dare not ask for such help from you without giving you anything in return. I want to offer a top-notch sword sutra that I acquired at Dalia's payment. I shall pay for the material cost of the work in sacred spirit stones as well." The Valley Master nodded as he heard Yi Futian talk. Yi Futian was one of the brightest figures in all of Emperor Xia's realm. If he were to go through the princess with such a request simply, the valley would have had to agree to it. However, Yi Futian did not do so. He paid a personal visit instead and was requesting services by trading for a fair price. Those actions earned the Valley Master's affinity, thinking that the young man to be a decent fellow. "No problem." The Valley Master did not hesitate and agreed to it right away. Since Yi Futian was giving him due respect, he was willing to return it with the same amount of respect. "Thank you, Valley Master." Yi Futian extended his hand and handed the sutra to the Valley Master, saying, "This is a top-notch sword sutra that was previously lost in Dali. It's called the Sword of Kasayapa." The Valley Master took it over and flipped the pages nonchalantly, finding it to be something decent. He then turned to Yi Futian and said, "This is indeed a precious piece. What kind of implement would you like forged?" "Swords." Yi Futian said, "I would like a sword capable of incorporating my life spirit into it, as well as a batch of swords of space." Those swords were something he wanted made for Yaya. Yaya's training had yet to be restored to its pinnacle state. The last battle cost her considerably, and he was unwilling to see something like that to happen again. As such, he wanted a batch of swords crafted in order to help her in future battles. If he were to request something like that of the Valley Master, he was naturally expecting the products to be top of the line, which would have definitely come at considerable costs. They were things that conventional armorers were incapable of crafting, after all. "No problem." The Valley Master then asked, "When would you like them finished?" "The sooner, the better," Yi Futian answered. The Valley Master then took a look at the fourth prince, who then said, "It's completely fine to attend to his request first. I'm in no hurry." "Are you here for matters concerning armoring as well, Your Highness?" "If that's the case, it's completely fine for my request to be finished later," Yi Futian added. "It's all right. Let's get yours made first." Xia Kuan smiled and said, "Thank you, Your Highness." Yi Futian thanked the fourth prince. "Well, in that case, let's get to it right away. If you'd like a ritual implement capable of incorporating your life spirit, it would be best that you stay around and help with the crafting process. I'll be bothering you at Divine Cloud Valley for some time then, Senior." Yi Futian nodded. "Valley Master, I shall take my leave then," Xia Kuan then said. "Very well. Goodbye, Your Highness." The Valley Master nodded and ordered men to send the prince off while he brought Yi Futian elsewhere and ignited the forge. Several days later, golden flames shooting up to the heavens were seen at the forging tower of Divine Cloud Valley. Many were watching the Valley Master himself at work. There was a terrifying great matrix at the front where sword aura of their world manifested in a frenzy and melded within the matrix. There seemed to be a leaf-shaped sword appearing above the matrix. The weather above the sword at that moment changed, their surroundings shrouded by stifling might. Terrifying diagrams of sword arts were projected in the heavens, surrounding that sword. A silver-haired figure sat cross-legged and unleashed his will into the matrix, incorporating his will as a saint while sensing the terrifying power ahead, melding with it. The Valley Master formed a mudra in his hand. Boundless sword will in the heavens gushed from the matrix downwards, following the terrifying diagrams and flowed into Yi Futian's brow, making him shine brilliantly all over with holy light. The power of the great path was imbued within the sword. How much of the weapon's power could be brought out became solely dependent on Yi Futian's power. Boundless light flowed into Yi Futian's brow after quite a while. Sword will coiled around him before their surroundings returned to their usually quiet state. The Valley Master brought the spectators and everyone else away, leaving Yi Futian sitting cross-legged over there. Extremely holy light glittered in his mind, causing imperial will to ebb at his brow, which was then incorporated within the sword. He was there to get a trump card for himself forged, enabling him to gain an extra element of surprise at key moments, which, in turn, would allow him a means to end his enemy without regard to level difference. The sword will around him gradually dissipated after a while. The light on his brow disappeared as well, and it was only then that he rose and left. The Valley Master then began to forge the other swords the next day. The process had taken even more time, and only ended when he had finished crafting multiple swords of space for Yi Futian. He put the swords away and looked at the Valley Master, saying, "Thank you for all your hard work, Valley Master. I'm forever in your debt. I'm just doing what I can." "No need for such gratitude," the Valley Master replied. "If there shall be anything you'd need in the future, please do inform me," Yi Futian said again. "Will do." The Valley Master nodded with a smile and did not refuse. Yi Futian then brought his people and left. The Valley Master of Divine Cloud Valley had a lot of thoughts as he watched Yi Futian leave. The trip seemed to be one where Yi Futian requested for him to make things, but it was actually one to forge good relations between the two of them. At the same time, it undid the scuffles between Yi Futian and Gong Sunzhong all those years ago. No one knew whose Emperor Xia's realm it would be in the future, after all. Yi Futian was playing the guqin at the cottage villa. Yi Futian was playing the guqin at the cottage villa. Someone walked up to him at that moment. It was Gu Donglu. "How is training, third brother?" Yi Futian looked at Gu Donglu and asked. "Saint Plane bottleneck," Gu Donglu answered. His plane had been higher than Yi Futian's a long time ago, and his state of mind had always been superb. However, he remained incapable of making the breakthrough. He needed some opportunity to make the breakthrough. "You're getting ready to leave?" Gu Donglu asked. "Yeah." Yi Futian nodded. "I've been training in isolation for some time ever since I made it into St. Plain. It's time that I venture outside. Furthermore, you guys probably need your turning points. If isolation isn't doing you guys any good for making the breakthrough, why not try and venture outside instead?" Gu Donglu nodded and said, "What about the villa? I'll get the princess to look after the place. There shouldn't be any surprises for us at this point," Yi Futian replied. "When will we be departing?" Gu Donglu asked again. "I'll go to the royal palace for a bit. We'll get ready to depart after that." Yi Futian got up and said, "I'd get the others to get ready." Gu Donglu did not say anything further, turning around and leaving. Yi Futian took to the air and headed for the royal palace. It has been quite a while since the last time Yi Futian went to Emperor Xia's palace. He had never stepped foot into the royal palace ever since he met Emperor Xia personally last year. He went to the princess residence in the royal palace that day. Xia Qingyuan looked rather displeased seeing Yi Futian show up. She asked coldly, "What brings you here?" "When I last met His Majesty, he told me to look for you when I was ready to leave." Yi Futian then continued, "I hope you'll tell me what I need to know, princess." Xia Qingyuan stared at Yi Futian. She knew what he was there for. It seemed that he had gotten ready to leave. "Empress Qin," Xia Qingyuan looked at Yi Futian and said. "Empress Qin." Yi Futian looked at Xia Qingyuan. "The person you're looking for. She is Qin Gu, an empress of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path." Xia Qingyuan looked at Yi Futian and explained. She was a legendary empress. However, the empress is at the Supreme Path realm, which is extremely far away from Emperor Xia's realm. Despite having made it into St. Plain, getting there will take you an untold number of years. Xia Qingyuan looked at Yi Futian. She waved her hand, and a jade scroll flew at Yi Futian. Yi Futian extended his will inside and found a map. The 3,000 realms of the Great Path were scattered all over the place and spread out in a cascading manner, seemingly without rules and making them look like stars. Every single realm was like a star in itself. Yi Futian found where Emperor Xia's realm was and found Emperor Li's realm, and the Demon Peacock Emperor's realm at its left and right, respectively. Other than that, there were also other Renwang's realms, clustered together like a region of stars, and there was actually a curved line circling them as if to mark them deliberately. There were words denoting the region, the Crimson Dragon region. The region you see Emperor Xia's realm in is known as the Crimson Dragon region, which includes Emperor Xia's realm, Emperor Li's realm, and many other Renwang's realms in it. All of them are parts forming the Crimson Dragon region, and the topmost realm was the center of the Crimson Dragon region, the Crimson Dragon realm. Xia Qingyuan then elaborated, the Crimson Dragon realm is also the liveliest, most bustling realm within the region, attracting all manner of mighty ones there. Furthermore, it is a nexus connecting other regions. Every realm within the Crimson Dragon region has a grand teleportation matrix leading to the Crimson Dragon realm. Yi Futian's eyes sparkled. What Xia Qingyuan meant was that there should have been one such matrix leading straight to Crimson Dragon realm in Emperor Xia's realm. If you want to find the Empress, you should use the Crimson Dragon realm as your springboard before venturing into other realms. Xia Qingyuan continued. Yi Futian nodded, saying, "Thank you, Princess. Is the royal palace capable of sending me straight to Crimson Dragon realm?" "It is." Xia Qingyuan nodded. "If that is the case, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you again, Princess," Yi Futian said. "No need to thank me. I'm going out on a pilgrimage myself as well, and I'll be heading to Crimson Dragon realm as well, so I'll be taking you with me," Xia Qingyuan said coldly. Yi Futian blinked. "I'm afraid that would be rather awkward, Princess." Yi Futian's eyes looked shifty. No one knew what the trip would have entailed, and Xia Qingyuan's status was special. "If you're not going with me, then you figure out how to get there yourself." Xia Qingyuan shot a cold glance at Yi Futian. Yi Futian felt as if he was being crushed between her fingers and said in an exasperating tone, "Sorry to trouble you then, Princess." Xia Qingyuan looked at him coldly. "Since when did Yi Futian get so polite?" "I'll head back and finish my preparations," Yi Futian said and left right after. However, he stopped after taking several steps. He remembered that it was his actions of making use of the matrix before that led to all that had happened afterward. Now, he halted his steps and seemed to be steeped in deep thought. Xia Qingyuan looked at Yi Futian's back and felt puzzled. What is he thinking now? She wondered. Yi Futian stopped for a bit before turning around. He looked at Xia Qingyuan and asked, "Princess, may I ask for a favor?" "Speak." Xia Qingyuan had no idea what was going through Yi Futian's mind. "This trip might be somewhat dangerous, and I think you should stay where you are," Yi Futian said. "Speak." Xia Qingyuan's tone turned even colder. "That be asterisk starred." Yi Futian spoke his mind, and Xia Qingyuan looked rather puzzled. Thoughts seemed to be running behind those bright eyes of hers, and she looked at Yi Futian, saying after a while, "I'll do the setup." Yi Futian nodded before walking out of the princess residence. However, he was unable to make it far before someone else had gotten in his way. "Princess Shi," Yi Futian looked at the alluring figure before him and cupped his hands, greeting her. "Why don't you come to visit my place since you're here at the royal palace, Sir Yi? You're telling me that you've forgotten all about me so quickly," Yao Shi said as she seductively looked at Yi Futian. "I have business to attend to. Help yourself around, Princess Shi," Yi Futian cupped his hands and said, disappearing as soon as he finished. Emperor Xia had warned her before. They were in the royal palace and directly under the scrutiny of Emperor Xia. Yao Shi would not have dared to do anything to harm him. Best not get on the bad side of this woman. "You afraid I'm going to eat you up or something?" Yao Shi called out without caring where she was. Her eyes were sad and resentful. Many in the royal palace heard her voice and felt speechless. That Yi Futian is one hell of a lucky asterisk shoal. The people from the cottage villa came to the royal palace in a low-profile manner several days later, hardly alerting anyone around them. The teleportation grand matrix in the royal palace lit up, and many disappeared from Emperor Xia's palace right away. Princess Xia Qingyuan left with them. It was not until Xia Qingyuan went off that someone, including Yao Shi, took notice, wondering where Xia Qingyuan had taken Yi Futian. However, the ones guarding the matrix actually kept the whole thing a secret and did not say anything to anyone. In the royal palace of Dali dynasty several days later, Li Yao had seen some dark times after the incident with the seventh swordsman all those years ago. He had originally been a student of the imperial advisor in name and had gotten close to the imperial advisor's residence. However, due to the case with the seventh swordsman, he had almost turned against the imperial advisor and was at odds with them. He had even gotten the prince regent to act, yet the prince regent was blocked off by the imperial advisor, allowing Yi Futian to leave alive. As such, Li Yao became the most downtrodden one in Dali dynasty. Both sides wanted to have nothing to do with him. Li Yao reflected on himself and trained in isolation since then, and was actually able to make it into Saint Plain at the start of year 10024 of Divine Prefecture calendar. That caused quite a commotion, and even Emperor Li took notice of him, thinking better of him. The third prince came to show goodwill as well. Li Yao began to get close to his third brother and the side of the royal members, cutting off contact with those from the imperial advisor altogether. Of course, it went without saying that the imperial advisor's residence was having quite a hard time. They were keeping a very low profile. "Your Highness," a servant girl came to report. "Who was it that allowed you to disturb me?" Li Yao, who was training, opened his eyes and shot a cold glare at her. Having one's training interrupted was something extremely irksome. "Your Highness, there is news from Emperor Xia's realm," the servant kneeled and said with a shuddering voice. Li Yao's eyes softened after he heard that it was news from Emperor Xia's realm. "Bring them in." "Yes, Your Highness." The servant girl left and quickly brought someone there. "Your Highness." That someone bowed. "What is it?" Li Yao glanced at the messenger, wondering if it had something to do with Yi Futian and if that man did something that would have astounded everyone yet again. There was news from Emperor Xia's palace saying that Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan activated the teleportation grand matrix in the royal palace, leaving Emperor Xia's realm, the messenger reported. "You sure about this?" Li Yao rose. "Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan both left Emperor Xia's realm?" The news could not be more true. Many knew of that news. Xia Qingyuan had indeed left with Yi Futian. "Where have they headed to?" Li Yao asked. The Emperor Xia's palace sealed the news, but there were rumors saying that Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan might have gone to train in the Crimson Dragon realm. The Crimson Dragon realm? Li Yao's eyes sparkled. The Crimson Dragon region consisted of both Emperor Xia's realm and Emperor Li's realm. The Crimson Dragon realm was the primary realm of the Crimson Dragon region. It was not a place where both Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan could throw their weight around, yet they had actually left for that place. "Is the news reliable?" Li Yao asked again. "There shouldn't be a problem," the messenger replied. Li Yao was feeling rather restless by then. Despite having broken into Saint Plain, there were some obsessions that he was unable to lay to rest. The time he spent being duped by Yi Futian proved to be the greatest insult he suffered in his life. He had to make Yi Futian pay for that. Yi Futian in Crimson Dragon realm, Li Yao mumbled to himself and then left. Yi Futian ventured outside with Xia Qingyuan, so Emperor Xia would have definitely sent powerful escorts to protect them along the way. Li Yao's current powers proved rather inadequate. However, it was a chance that he would absolutely not miss. The Crimson Dragon realm was the primary realm of the Crimson Dragon region, and the central areas of many regions were connected to many realms, making them extremely prosperous and bustling with people. The Crimson Dragon realm was the primary realm of the Crimson Dragon region, and the central areas of many regions were connected to many realms, making them extremely prosperous and bustling with people. People of all realms in the region came to train and explore there. It went without saying that those who were capable of crossing realms to train were either extremely powerful people or people with highly notable backgrounds. For instance, someone like Xia Qingyuan. Otherwise, the time that one would have spent crossing realms to train would have exceeded what ordinary cultivators were able to afford. Yi Futian and his party were already at Crimson Dragon realm, and for the past several days, they were able to feel one thing about the place: it was hot. Crimson Dragon realm was filled with intense, fiery aura throughout the place, like how the void aura permeated the entire empty realm. That place would have been a heaven for cultivators training in fire-related abilities. People who were versed in the will of the great path of fire would have been extremely suited to train at the Crimson Dragon realm. Furthermore, the fiery aura of the Crimson Dragon realm was more intense than the will of space found in the empty realm. As such, the place was very hot. But then again, cultivators cared little about their surrounding temperatures. It did not seem that the notion of spiritual qi in the upper worlds being abundant was an exaggeration. Furthermore, spiritual qi was not the only thing found in abundance. Futian even began to wonder what the true nature of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path actually was. Is it really like it is said in legends, that all realms are products born from the heavenly path shattering? He wondered. Futian was drinking at a restaurant in the Crimson Dragon realm, feeling scorching heat welling up from within his body. It was as if flames were about to shoot through his throat. Fiery will of the great path in his body was invoked, causing him to feel himself being set ablaze. The booze here really is something indeed, he thought. He took the cup on his left and mumbled, "Some fine booze indeed. No wonder it's so expensive. One hell of a luxury this thing is." The liquor contained the power of the great path, making a true fine brew of the great path. The price of one bottle of liquor was calculated in sacred spirit stones as well. No common folk would have been able to afford such an item. It was no wonder that those of high birth had a natural edge to them right from birth. If one were to think about the cultivators of the lower worlds, they were indeed a miserable lot. They lacked resources to back their training and had to rely on themselves to make it far enough before being able to enjoy more resources. The difficulty of them doing so far eclipsed those who had an impressive background. Xia Qingyuan was seated across Futian. She remained dressed in men's clothing and looking dashing. Curiosity could be seen in her eyes. "How about you give it a go?" Futian looked at Xia Qingyuan and said. As a daughter of Renhuang, Xia Qingyuan had naturally enjoyed all manner of resources, but she was a light drinker. She poured herself a cup after being urged by Futian, before emptying it. As someone who had yet to make it to St. Plain, she felt as if her internal organs were burning, and her body had been set on fire. Her face was burning red in an instant as well. She stared at Futian. Her eyes looked like they were about to spit flames. Futian looked at her and then said with a grin, "You don't look half bad like that at all. But don't drink so much in one go. It'd be quite a waste." He then took the bottle away from Xia Qingyuan and handed it to another woman sitting elsewhere, saying, "Phoenix, you, on the other hand, should drink more and don't let it go to waste." Phoenix trained in fire-type abilities. "Can I try too, master?" The black-winged condor stuck its head over, and Xia Qingyuan shot a look at the bird, who then lowered its head, lowering its neck. It was tough for a bird to get around. "How far are we away from Crimson Dragon City?" Futian asked Xia Qingyuan. He did not look at the map of Crimson Dragon Realm carefully. Xia Qingyuan had one with her, after all. 2 to 3 days away, Xia Qingyuan replied. The Crimson Dragon City was the main city of Crimson Dragon Realm. It was located at the absolute center of the realm. Crimson Dragon Realm is indeed a big place, Futian mumbled. Big and very hot. It was said that the Crimson Dragon Realm had 9 suns, and they took turns rising. There was no night in the realm, only day. There were rumors saying that the master of Crimson Dragon Realm, the Crimson Dragon Emperor, had a wife who was an empress. She spent her days basking in the sun. While the truth of the rumor remained to be seen, it nonetheless made Futian realize how truly terrifying extremely highly trained cultivators were. He had never experienced how powerful cultivators of Renhuang Plain truly were, but saints were terrifying enough as they were. At the level of Renhuang, one could kill millions simply by being angry, practically causing a genocide. The Crimson Dragon Realm was at the center of the region. Cultivators from all realms gathered there, so it was only natural that the realm is huge. Not only is the place huge, but extremely powerful people are also practically everywhere. Your training doesn't seem to be much compared to these people. Xia Qingyuan took a look at Futian and continued. Furthermore, due to being the center of the region, Crimson Dragon Realm is a very messy place. Mighty people from all realms clash often, and martial arts are greatly proliferated here. There are many cities and training resources to be found. They are taken by people powerful enough to claim and keep them. Plundering often happens here. Yi Futian chuckled. His training was indeed considered weak if compared to those throughout the 3,000 realms. However, being a saint, he no doubt was qualified enough to venture throughout the world, and he was indeed no weakling. His powers had surpassed most people after all. Saints were always able to find a place where they belonged in any realm. For instance, in Emperor Xia's realm, the Jewing Sword Saint was but an ordinary saint, yet he was nonetheless able to establish the Jewing Palace. Due to him usually being surrounded by people from top-notch forces, his sainthood training did not seem to stand out all that much. In truth, however, any saint would have been regarded as powerful people in any realm. While the place is messy, it presents a lot of opportunities. A voice was heard at that moment. Yi Futian and the others turned around, looking at the ones sitting at a table beside theirs. The one who spoke wore a blue shirt and looked to be around 30 years of age, yet he was brimming with superb bearing. It was apparent that he was a saint. None of the people around him had common bearings either. Yi Futian was naturally able to sense that their powers were very strong. He had taken notice of the group a while ago. However, with the Crimson Dragon realm quite literally overflowing with powerful cultivators, they did not seem to be out of place. I take it that you all are from other realms then? The young man asked Yi Futian and his party. He was gauging the party as he asked. There was little need to say much about Yi Futian's bearing. Despite being dressed in men's clothing, Xia Qingyuan was nonetheless a beauty. The glass saint was, too, a top-class beauty. Yaya looked very young, but he was unable to tell what level her training was actually at, but she was definitely very powerful. Even the sages did not look to be ordinary folk, which meant that they were possibly of top-notch forces from other realms, who came all the way to the Crimson Dragon realm to train. There were too many people like that in the Crimson Dragon realm. Many cultivators were coming from all realms to train every day, and every single one of them was of top-notch forces in their respective realms. Yeah, Yi Futian nodded and said, we're from other realms. The name's Shinjun, from Qianya City. I just came from training at Fusang Valley. I'm getting ready to head back to Qianya City. If you guys are heading to Crimson Dragon City, I'd say that it's quite a coincidence since we're heading there as well, the young man smiled and said. Fusang Valley? Xia Qingyuan turned her eyes at Shinjun, so are the rumors concerning the Fusang Valley true? Xia Qingyuan looked at Shinjun and asked, I have heard that there is a Fusang tree in the Fusang Valley that shoots up to the heavens. 9 suns revolve around the tree as they rise and fall in sequence. The suns are, too, bathing in Fusang Valley. My level of training does not permit me to enter the center of Fusang Valley, so I have never seen it myself. But it might actually be true. Shinjun smiled and continued, what plans do you have at Crimson Dragon City, by the way? Have you found a place to stay? We're venturing out far away on a pilgrimage and have no specific goals. We plan to settle down at Crimson Dragon City first, Yi Futian replied. In that case, why don't we head there together, then? You could all settle down at Qianya City. That would save you a lot of trouble. Qianya City is not far away from Crimson Dragon City, after all. Shinjun extended an invitation. There are many small cities surrounding Crimson Dragon City, and it is said that most are private estates. Xia Qingyuan looked at Shinjun, and you are looking at the young city lord of Qianya City, Shinjun smiled and replied. Xia Qingyuan nodded. Things sounded normal in that case. Since you're so kind to extend such an invitation to us, Brother Shin, we shall not be standing on ceremony then, Yi Futian agreed to the proposal. They saved themselves a lot of trouble with someone leading the way, and they did not need to look for somewhere to settle down. Xia Qingyuan took one look at Yi Futian, thinking that he might have been too eager to accept such a proposal. Resources at the central region of Crimson Dragon Realm are all taken up by top-notch forces around. All of the cities had their masters, and they possess absolute rights in determining how their cities are run. The Crimson Dragon Emperor does not concern himself with any of those and lets the people of Crimson Dragon Realm quarrel among themselves. Being a young city lord means that Shinjun has some kind of background. He might be up to something inviting us to the city, Xia Qingyuan said to Yi Futian telepathically. You're of some kind of background yourself, princess? Yi Futian replied. With this Shenjun guy leading the way, we'll be saving ourselves a lot of trouble. Regardless of his motives, I do not need to worry about anything, since you're around after all, princess. Xia Qingyuan glared at Yi Futian. Just what does that B** take me for? Who is the valet here? She thought. Yi Futian ignored Xia Qingyuan's glare. You're the one who insisted on coming after all. I'm not going to hold back then. That was quick. How may I address you? Shenjun asked. Name's Yi Futian. Shenjun smiled and nodded, saying, You, your wife, and the others will be pleased when you reach Qianye City. My wife? Yi Futian was dumbfounded. Xia Qingyuan saw Shenjun looking at her in a peculiar manner and retorted coldly, I'm no wife of his. My bad. Shenjun cupped his hands and apologized. He was able to tell from how the two looked at each other that they had a solid relationship. He was simply testing things out by calling them husband and wife, and it did not really matter if he was right. However, Yi Futian did not seem to have any intention of introducing Xia Qingyuan, and Shenjun found the relationship between the two puzzling. The black-winged condor opened its eyes wide and took one look at Xia Qingyuan, finding her to be oddly calm. The bird was praying deep down that the way those two were addressed earlier would never come true. My days would go down the gutter if that were to come true, it thought. So, we're departing now? Shenjun asked again. No problem. Yi Futian nodded. Alright, in that case, let's go then. It's quite a distance from here. Shenjun smiled and rose. All of them walked out of the restaurant and took to the air, continuing to head straight for the central region of the Crimson Dragon realm. Yi Futian looked up at the sun hanging high in the sky. Is it true that the Crimson Dragon realm has 9 suns? He wondered. The Crimson Dragon realm was only the main realm of the Crimson Dragon region, and the fiery aura was already that intense. I wonder what the Supreme Path realm is like, he thought. Yi Futian was getting increasingly curious about the world of cultivators. What would the eyes of an emperor be able to see indeed? The Crimson Dragon City served as the center of Crimson Dragon Realm, and many cities were surrounding it. There were people building cities outside Crimson Dragon City in the early days of the realm. As time passed, the number of cities grew, and the place became what it was at present. The Crimson Dragon City served as the center of Crimson Dragon Realm, and many cities were surrounding it. There were people building cities outside Crimson Dragon City in the early days of the realm. As time passed, the number of cities grew, and the place became what it was at present. The Crimson Dragon Realm was at the center of Crimson Dragon region, and all manner of people were found in that realm. Other than cultivators native to Crimson Dragon Realm, there were also cultivators from other realms. Some were there for pilgrimage, and some settled down at the realm for good. As such, the Crimson Dragon Realm was extraordinarily prosperous and lively, in a manner that Emperor Xia's realm and Emperor Li's realm were unable to compare to at all. The place was a main realm of the region, after all, gathering mighty ones from many other realms. As such, the many cities littered around Crimson Dragon City were also controlled by mighty ones from all places. Powerful cultivators took cities and called themselves king, as they became king of a city. There were those who gave it their all to manage their cities, making their respective cities forces that belonged entirely to themselves, and things continued to develop from there. Some made the cities a place of training for their clans and families, taking over the entire place but never bothering themselves to manage them. There was also an extremely rare bunch who went about taking one whole city for themselves only, making the place their private training ground. The Crimson Dragon Emperor did not concern himself with any of that and simply let things take their own courses. The turnaround of those cities was intense. Qianye City was one of those cities and had been around for many years, becoming quite a place in itself. 2 groups of people came from the air high above Qianye City. It was the young city lord of Qianye City, Shenjun, and Yi Futian's party, coming to Qianye City. Xia Qingyuan introduced what she knew about the Crimson Dragon Realm in detail to Yi Futian along the way. Yi Futian developed some knowledge about the realm. The main realm of the Crimson Dragon region was far more chaotic and intense than places like Emperor Xia's realm. The notion of the strong preying on the weak was shown in a more clear manner. Xinjun turned his eyes to Yi Futian and the newcomers' party at that moment, saying, "You are here from other realms. Do you have any plans to stay here for long? If you people are indeed planning to stay here for some time, would you mind being the City Lord's office's guests, then?" "Thank you, Brother Xin, but we're only here for training and will be leaving before long." "There is no need to bother you any further." Yi Futian refused. The way Xinjun put it, it seemed that he intended to get them to side with the City Lord's office. However, there was no way they would become a part of other forces at the Crimson Dragon realm. It was apparent that Xinjun had good eyes for gauging people, wanting to make them his people. "Very well." Xinjun smiled and did not mind. He then continued, "We met at a restaurant out there, and since we're all now here at Qianye City, I'll be your host. Let's go to the best restaurant in the city." "Thank you, Brother Xin." Yi Futian smiled and agreed to it. Xia Qingyuan, who was at his side, glared at him and said telepathically, "This Xinjun guy is a young city lord and has quite a background. The way he is doing things with us makes it seem like he's trying to buy us over. There is no way we will do it, so why get so close to him?" "Princess, when one trains outside, the people one gets to know come from all corners of the world. Now that we're at a main realm and there are so many mighty ones around, if Xinjun proves to be of goodwill, then we have nothing to lose being friends with him. If he is up to no good, then we have nothing to fear either," Yi Futian replied. They were only stopping by. It felt right to be at home everywhere since they were out on a pilgrimage after all. Seeing that Yi Futian knew what he was doing, so Xia Qingyuan did not say anything further. Since they were away from Emperor Xia's realm, she did not seem to have that much of a say of things anymore despite being a princess. As such, she just let him be. The largest restaurant in Qianye City was one of the businesses ran by the City Lord's office. The scene at their place, above the stairs and below the pavilions, looked very elegant, and one would have been lucky to look at the scene far away, drinking there. Xinjun then gave the people around him their orders. Several of them took flight and left. He then looked at Yi Futian at his side, smiling and saying, "I'd say that you, Brother Yi, definitely have exceptional talents, being able to become a saint at such a young age. I've just ordered someone to invite some young saints here, and we could talk about training." "Sounds great. I'd like to meet the saints of Crimson Dragon City as well." Yi Futian smiled and nodded. "I have forgotten to ask. Which realm are you from?" Xinjun asked again. "I'm from Emperor Xia's realm." Yi Futian answered truthfully. Xinjun nodded and said, "I have heard of the realm, one that belongs to the Crimson Dragon region as well. But I have never left Crimson Dragon realm despite having been training for so long. That is one of my regrets." The Crimson Dragon realm is the main realm of the region itself. It's perfectly normal to have never left. If the trip is for training, I'm afraid you'll have to go to other realms that are more powerful, Yi Futian smiled and said. Cultivators aimed for higher heights, so there was no way they would have ventured to weaker places instead. Having made it from the 9 states to the upper worlds of Emperor Xia's realm, there was no way Yi Futian would have ventured to other lower worlds to train. It might have been possible if he were to be going to those places to temper his state of mind, though. "You have a point," Xinjun smiled and said. He then looked at Xia Qingyuan and the others. The most attractive people in the group were all women. Since Yi Futian did not introduce any of them to him, it would have been awkward for him to ask. He was still unable to discern the relationship between everyone. For instance, Xia Qingyuan had always behaved in a cold and aloof manner, looking haughty and prideful, which meant that she was of very high status within the party. She and Yi Futian were always among the crowd, yet she was not Yi Futian's wife, and there had never been an intimacy shown between the two. From the looks of it all, those people might have been people studying under the same teacher. Yi Futian and Xia Qingyuan might have been holding core positions within the clan. Xinjun asked proactively after having that thought. "I suppose your group is people studying in the same clan, Brother Yi?" Yi Futian knew that Xinjun was curious. He then smiled and said, "You could say that. Most of us here do indeed study within the same clan." I suppose your teacher is extraordinary for being able to produce students such as yourself, Shinjun smiled and said. Yi Futian smiled and said nothing more. Both of them chatted leisurely, and many below the restaurant looked up in their direction. Some were curious about the identities of Yi Futian and his people. They were, after all, received personally by the young city lord, and they were still shrouded in mystery. The only thing known about them was that they all felt extraordinary. A figure came through the air at that moment. That person flew straight into the restaurant and arrived where they were with just a single step. That person wore a long robe, and his hair was pitch black. His eyes were brimming, and an overbearing aura emanated from him. Young city lord. He nodded to Shinjun as he greeted him. He then turned his eyes at Yi Futian and the others, looking rather hostile. Mo Chen, Shinjun then said, this is Yi Futian. We got to know each other when I was on my way back from Fusang Valley. Mo Chen took one look at Yi Futian with a plain expression. One could describe him as cold. Yet another figure arrived where they were right there and then. It was a woman. Her sleeves and long hair billowed. She was of decent appearance, and there was an exceptional bearing about her. She wore plainly and looked clean and clear-cut. You're in quite a good mood, young city lord, the woman looked at Shinjun and said. City Yen, the eldest daughter of the Situ clan of Qianye City. The youngest woman in St. Plain. Shinjun introduced each other. Even in Qianye City, there were a few saints who were Yi Futian's age. Other than resources, one also needed talent and the right state of mind to achieve much in cultivation. Accomplishing that also required time and experience. At that moment, an extremely hot aura was sensed. Everyone turned to look far away. A huge fiery beast appeared in the sky. It was the fiend Qiongqi. That demonic beast was humongous and was oozing rage and hostility. Black flames were burning all over its body as if it was something that came from hell. A low-pitched roar was heard, and the fiend headed straight for the steps below. Many evaded, and a girl turned around and looked at the Qiongqi that was about to descend, feeling terrified. Look out, someone yelled. Stop it already. Situ Yen eyed the carriage on the Qiongqi's back and shouted. However, the ones on it seemed to have heard nothing. The huge body continued to descend, and it seemed as if it was about to step onto the girl. Yi Futian and his people frowned at the scene. He then stood up and disappeared. The fiend seemed to have been stopped by a formless will of the great path at the very moment it descended. A bolt of lightning flashed, and the little girl disappeared from where she was. The fiend descended with a loud boom. Many were still reeling from the shock. They turned around and looked at the steps above, seeing a silver-haired figure cradling the little girl in his arms, casting a cold glare before him. It's okay. Yi Futian lowered his head and looked at the trembling little girl, consoling her. Ran. An elder ran up to him, and his face was ashen from fright. The little girl cried as she ran to the elder. Yi Futian turned around and looked at the fiend. A voice was heard from it. Will of the great path of space. The voice sounded slightly demonic. One figure after another clad in white flashed. All of them were pretty women, and it seemed that they were all very young, looking to be around 20 or so. They laid prostrate before the fiend as they landed. A young cultivator clad in white walked out of the carriage on the Qiongqi's back. His white garb looked utterly stainless. And even his shoes looked spotless. That young face looked slightly demonic, and he had an extremely fair complexion. The man stepped out and walked by stepping onto the women. He walked to the front of the steps and looked at Yi Futian. Yi Futian looked at him as well with rather cold eyes. The world of cultivators had all manners of people in it, after all. The man did not mind and looked at the old man and the girl, saying, she was lucky enough to survive. Send her over to the Bliss Palace tomorrow. The old man looked up in a trembling manner at the young man who spoke. His face was ashen, yet he lowered his head, saying, understood. No need for that, old man. Yi Futian looked at the old man and said. The old man looked at Yi Futian, wanting to say something, yet he ended up saying nothing. The young man smirked hearing Yi Futian's words. He then looked at Yi Futian and said, you take pity on them, then? What do you think will happen to her in the end if she does not enter Bliss Palace? Not as bad as you make it seem, Yi Futian replied. The other party smirked sarcastically. There were many people like that in the world of cultivators, no background and no one to look after them. Crimson Dragon Realm would not have ended up as much in the end. It was him being generous for allowing her to enter Bliss Palace. All right, Brother Yi is a guest of mine. At that moment, Shinjun's voice was heard from the pavilion. The young man then moved his eyes away from Yi Futian, looking at Shinjun and nodded. Young city lord. Shinjun nodded and said, come on in. Shinjun nodded and said, come on in. Yi Futian glanced at the other party before turning around, settling back into his seat. That young man walked to the restaurant and sat somewhere. His demonic eyes had been lingering on Xia Qingyuan, the glass saint, and the women in the group when he turned to look at Yi Futian. Xia Qingyuan frowned, her eyes looking colder than usual. Brother Yi, this is the young palace lord of the Bliss Palace of Qinya City, Bai Zhe. He has a habit of going about things his way. I hope you can forgive that, Shinjun said to Yi Futian. He turned around to look at Bai Zhe. Bai Zhe, it's best that you keep your eyes peeled on the future. If it had not been for Brother Yi making a move, your beast might have just stepped on her. She would be spared from having to experience the cruelty of the world in the future, then. Bai Zhe's expression was calm. He seemingly did not feel anything wrong with what he did. Everyone has their own fate to deal with. Even if there are trials and tribulations in the future, it is their path to walk. There is no need for you to find an excuse for your cold-blooded nature. Sidu Yen glanced at Bai Zhe and said, Ms. Sidu hails from a renowned clan and has never known the insignificance and despair felt by the weak. Bai Zhe looked at Situ Yen and replied. Situ Yen recalled her background when she heard what Bai Zhe said. It was said that Bai Zhe had been through a lot since young, and he was able to get as far as he did by climbing out of a sea of blood. That was why he had an obsession with cleanliness, with not a single speck of dust being found on him. He also liked young, pretty women, those who were brimming with the zest of life. It reminded him that his own blood was still warm. She was born in a place like Qinya City, and none of her elders were able to serve as much of a backing for her. They were unable to even look after her. What do you think would have become of her from here on out? Bai Zhe elaborated without the slightest hint of emotion, sounding rather demonic. Regardless of the life she would be walking from here on out, it's not your place to decide for her, Yi Futian said coldly. But it is indeed my place. Bai Zhe turned to look at Yi Futian after hearing his words. Both men glared at each other, without either of them willing to look away. There is no need for you to argue. Shinjun then said, Brother Yi and his people came all the way from Emperor Xia's realm. I've invited you all here to drink, not fight. One's drinking companion is of the utmost importance. Forgive me, Brother Shin, I'm in no mood to drink with one such person, Yi Futian said coldly. I think it'd be awfully boring as well. Bai Zhe glanced at Yi Futian plainly before turning to Xia Qingyuan and the glass saint. But the two of you, would you like to have a drink? Get lost. Xia Qingyuan glanced at him in a cold, condescending manner, her eyes filled with contempt. As for the glass saint, she behaved as if she had never heard him in the first place, staying quiet. Bai Zhe's eyes continued to stare at the two of them. A plain grin was seen on his pale face, and it seemed as if he did not mind at all. Idiot! The bird shot a look of contempt at Bai Zhe. My master has yet to throw his weight around, and yet this dude thinks he owns the place now? It thought. While that demonic woman is indeed rather brutal, she is definitely not someone that Shoal deserves to lay hands on, it thought. Xia Qingyuan's eyes softened somewhat when she looked at the black-winged condor. Where did the animal come from? Bai Zhe's eyes turned demonic as he shot a look at the bird. Plain pressure was emanated, and the black-winged condor sensed danger. However, its eyes continued to stare at him. It said, and I was thinking of telling you to call me Master. Several figures clad in black appeared behind Bai Zhe, looking cold and murderous. Well, since none of you people are willing to drink, I guess it would not be a bad thing to see you guys fight instead. But then again, don't go too far. Let's see what the ones who have yet to break into the Saint Plane are made of then, Shinjun said and looked at Yusheng Yi Wuchen, and the others behind Yi Futian. I'm completely fine with that. Bai Zai's eyes remained on the black wind condor. Call you master? He thought. What do you think, brother Yi? Shinjun looked at Yi Futian and asked. Yi Futian looked up and shot a thoughtful look at Shinjun, then said, those people are not qualified. He then rose and said to Shinjun, I have lost my mood today, and I shall take my leave. Please excuse me, brother Shin. Shinjun nodded after seeing Yi Futian and his people rise. He then asked, would you like me to see to accommodation arrangements for you? No need for that. I'll look for a place myself, Yi Futian said and ventured outside. He did not bother to even look at Bai Zai on his way out, merely passing by his side. The others followed Yi Futian and left. He scanned the place a little bit after walking out of the restaurant before heading somewhere else. An old man and a little girl were walking in Chenya City. They evaded anyone who they passed, looking exceptionally tiny and insignificant in the crowd. Old man. The old man halted his steps. He turned around and saw Yi Futian before bowing and saying, greetings, young man. Uncle, the little girl called. Her eyes still looked sweet and innocent. Yi Futian walked up and patted the little girl's head, before turning to look at the old man, saying, I see that the young palace lord of Bliss Palace being a demonic guy who is up to no good. Just what kind of a place is Bliss Palace? The old man was alerted and scanned their surroundings after hearing Yi Futian's words. He lowered his voice and said, the cultivators of the Bliss Palace are indeed a very eerie, demonic bunch. The young palace lord is more so. He likes young girls and uses them as cauldrons to train. Why were you still willing to send her to the Bliss Palace, then? Yi Futian asked. What else could I do? I was once a servant of little Ran's parents. I've been looking after her ever since her parents died. In a place like Chenya City, it would be best for little Ran here to be a servant girl for some larger force. While the young palace lord of the Bliss Palace is using girls as cauldrons for training, at least the girls around him are able to train with him nonetheless. I hope little Ran is of better talent. She might have better opportunities. The old man sighed. But then again, if you are willing to take her in, I would be able to die in peace. The old man then kneeled on the ground. The little girl wanted to kneel as well, but Yi Futian stopped her. Yi Futian remained speechless for quite some time. He had once how wonderful it would have been if people of the 9 states of the lower worlds, from places like the Eastern Barren Territory and the Nandu Nation, were able to train in the upper worlds. However, at that moment, he seemed to have realized that not everyone would have been able to be like him, capable of moving up step by step, and be able to be met with the best forces there were whenever he might have ended up in. The people of every realm had their own way of survival. Powerful people were able to stand out from the crowd. In contrast, in places where resources were abundant and cultivators were commonly powerful, weak people without backgrounds were destined to be marginalized, making even just surviving difficult. But then again, there was also an extreme handful who were able to struggle and survive, getting more powerful one step at a time. However, for someone like little Ran, who lost her parents, the possibility of such a thing happening was infinitely small. Worse still, the Crimson Dragon realm was extremely vast. Just struggling and breaking free of the place would have proven difficult. The Crimson Dragon realm was a chaotic place, which made conditions far harsher than places like Emperor Xia's realm. He was right though. Maybe Bliss Palace is indeed not that bad of a choice for her. A voice was heard, and a woman arrived. It was none other than Situ Yen. The woman, who was the youngest saint in the Situ clan, was saying something that made Yi Futian feel pitiful. However, there was nothing he was able to say to retort. We know that some things are wrong. But why do we console ourselves instead of righting said wrongs? Yi Futian mumbled. It sounded like he was talking to Situ Yen, but at the same time, it was like he was asking himself. A realm is vast. How much could even saints be able to change? How would we go about righting said wrongs? Situ Yen asked. The ancient ones had named plain levels of training of cultivators, with words like sages and saints. Did they mean only the magnitude of one's power when they said that? Yi Futian asked again. Situ Yen was astonished. Everyone in the world knew that Renhuang, saint, and sage meant planes of training, after all. I could bring her to the Situ clan. However, I would only be able to change her fate by doing so. How would we be able to change the world of cultivators as a whole? Futian took a good look at Yi Futian. She found that the silver-haired cultivator who came to the Crimson Dragon realm from other realms seemed different from the others. The old man kneeled and kowtowed to Futian, shedding tears. "Thank you." Yi Futian looked at Futian and said, "You're right. But then again, even though we might not be able to change the world of cultivators, we will at least be able to change what we can. What is the plane that the Palace Lord of Bliss Palace is at?" Futian stared at Yi Futian, saying, "He is an unblemished saint. What do you intend to do?" Bliss Palace was a top-notch force in Qianya City. The power of an unblemished saint would indeed be terrifying. Furthermore, there were many powerful saints to be found within the Bliss Palace. Yi Futian turned to look at Yaya. Yaya was able to tell what Yi Futian intended to do from the look in his eyes. She then nodded. He extended his hand and patted Yaya's head, smiling brimmingly. Yaya then glared at him. "Third brother, what is more powerful than reasoning?" Yi Futian turned around and asked Gu Donglu. "One's fist," Gu Donglu answered. The two brothers looked at each other. Their teacher had been propagating his ideals in the Eastern Barren territory back then, but eventually found that he needed to rely on his fist to do the talking. As such, Yi Futian came to admire Donghuang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing better. All great, lofty goals had to be built on the foundations of one's fist. Futian looked at the backs of Yi Futian and his people with a peculiar expression. Just what are these people trying to do here? She wondered. Bliss Palace had a great estate in Qianya City. The majestic palace was towering constructs built in a cascading manner, extending into the clouds. That palace looked like something suspended in the air far away, looking majestic and magnificent. The golden gates of the Bliss Palace looked extremely lavish as well. A group of people came below Bliss Palace at that moment, standing before the gates. Yi Futian stood at the forefront. Xia Qingyuan looked at him in silence, not bothering to stop him at all. If Yi Futian liked the idea, it would not have mattered much even if he ended up crushing the entire Bliss Palace. "Who are you people?" A mighty one standing before the gates of the Bliss Palace scolded Yi Futian and his party. Yi Futian did not bother saying anything. He took a few steps forward, and towering sword will emanated from his body all of a sudden. The sword aura shot to the skies and howling in the heavens, turning into shapes of leaves and pulsed with the dazzling light of the sword, circling above the heads of everyone present. The guard of the Bliss Palace was dumbfounded. Someone else yelled, "Intruders!" Sword will rain down from above as soon as the one yelling finished. The attack streaked through space as they rained. The great golden gates of the Bliss Palace crumbled right away at the very next moment. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.